is the 2022 Mercedes-Benz EQS, and it's a full-size electric luxury sedan. Think of this as an electric S-Class, except with a very different powertrain and very different styling. This has a starting price of over $100,000, and it might just be the future of Mercedes-Benz. And today, I'm going to review it. Before I get started, be sure to check out Cars and Bids, which is my enthusiast car auction website for cool cars from the modern era, now with free listings. You can list your car for free and auction it on Cars and Bids. And we've had some great sales recently on Cars and Bids, including this Chevy SS low mileage sold for over $46,000. This beautiful 991 Porsche 911 Black Edition sold for almost $75,000. And this fantastic old school Mercedes-Benz fire truck sold for $30,000. We love the weird stuff on Cars and Bids. If you're looking to sell your cool enthusiast car from the modern era, the 1980s and up, Cars and Bids is the place to do it. And if you're looking to buy a cool car, check out the great selection and daily auctions on Cars and Bids. So let's talk EQS. Like I said, electric full-size luxury sedan, and right now there are two versions to choose from. There's this one, the base model, the EQS 450 Plus, which starts around $103,000 with 330 horsepower and about 350 miles of range. Or you can step up to the EQS 580, which starts around $120,000 with about the same range figure, but an impressive 520 horsepower. Now, those range figures are not as good as Tesla, and this car has a higher price, but it also offers some luxury benefits that Tesla just doesn't have, which I will show you. This car also has a very distinctive look, as you can see, and it's the first in a line of electric vehicles from Mercedes-Benz. This is the EQS, which is equivalent to the S-Class. There's also going to be the EQE, which is roughly equivalent to the E-Class, and then the EQA and the EQB, which are little crossovers. And today I'm going to review the EQS, the future of Mercedes-Benz. First, I'll take you on a thorough tour of it and show you all of its interesting quirks and features. There are many. Then I'll get it out on the road and drive it, and then I'll give it a Doug score. All right, I'm going to start the quirks and features of the EQS on the inside, where you have its most unusual and interesting quirks, starting with the hyper screen. That's this massive screen you see here on the dashboard, stretching from one side of the car to the other. Mercedes says this is 56 inches of screen, going all the way from the edge of the driver's side to the edge of the passenger side. The entire dashboard of this car is a screen, and that would be the hyper screen. Now, the hyper screen is an option in this car. You can get an EQS with like a regular center screen and gauge screen and dashboard, but you shouldn't. The hyper screen is the big new cool thing in this car, and it is quite a sight to behold when you step inside this massive, massive screen, basically the entire front of this interior. So let's talk hyper screen. It's worth noting this isn't really one giant screen. Instead, it's separated into three separate display screens, with the most important one being right in the center, this massive center screen. And they say it's almost 18 inches, and it's really huge. The default state of this screen is this map, as you can see, this large satellite map, and that's always on there as sort of your basic level home screen. And you can see around the map there are a few sort of floating buttons and options that you can click on in case you want to set a navigation destination, for example, or connect a Bluetooth device. You have these floating buttons around your navigation map. Now, like I said, that map is sort of your home screen that's always there, but it's not the only default display in your center screen. You also have your climate controls here at the bottom of the screen, and no matter what screen you're on, what menu, the climate controls are always there. So they're always in the same place, and you can adjust them fairly easily regardless of what you're doing on the screen. They're not as easy maybe as reaching for a physical button, but at least they're always there, and you always know how to change your climate control controls in this part of the screen. Now, of course, this screen has more functionality than just a map and the climate controls, and you can reach more functions by pressing this home button, sort of the bottom center of the screen. And you can see right now, the home button has like leaves in it. I guess because I'm filming this video in the fall, and so it has leaves to match the fall season that I'm in, which I have to say is kind of a cool touch. But next, before I go any further in this screen, I want to talk about driver profiles. In a lot of cars, you have like two different keys, and each key is linked to a profile. So you get in and it recognizes which key is in, and then it adjusts the seats and the steering wheel and that sort of thing. In this car, it's done based on fingerprint. Check this out. You climb inside, and you have this little black square in the center console, and you can stick your finger in there, and then you can configure a fingerprint. And you can see the screen is asking if I want to do that now. If you do, you can set up your driver profile to match your fingerprint. So you climb in, you put your fingerprint in the center, and then it adjusts the seat and the steering wheel and all of your settings, climate control, lighting, everything to your preference based not on your key, but your fingerprint. Now, the benefit here is there can be more driver profiles. Instead of just linking it to keys, I think Mercedes says up to 7 driver profiles linked to fingerprints in this car, which is an incredibly cool feature. But next, I want to go back to the center screen, and I want to start with the climate controls. You have your climate controls down here, and it's all pretty standard stuff. You can adjust the air temperature, the airflow, that sort of thing. Makes sense, except for this display in the center, which is a little bit confusing. Some numbers, what is that? It's your air quality. You tap on that and it pulls up a screen showing your air quality outside the car and then your air quality inside the car after it's passed through this massive air cleaning system to make the interior as pure as possible. This actually shows your air quality in real time inside the car, which is a pretty amazing feature. Now, from this interior air quality menu, you can also turn on and off the interior fragrance. This car allows you to install a bottle of fragrance in your glove box, which is then linked to your climate control system. And you can turn on the fragrance, and then it will periodically blow out fragrant air to keep your interior smelling as nice as possible. And if you want to change the fragrance, just go to Mercedes-Benz, get a different fragrance, and then swap it out in your glove box, and you can have that fragrance instead. And next, we move on to an even crazier quirk in this screen, and that would be the sound experience in this car. And I'm not talking about the stereo, but rather the sound while you're driving. And this is an electric car, so it's silent, but you can turn on sounds. Mercedes offers 2 options. There's vivid flux or silver waves. As you can see, you can choose from those 2 options. And then as you accelerate, those sounds will play. Vivid flux has sort of a sci-fi sound to it. Take a listen if you turn on vivid flux and accelerate. Now, that is sort of weird and futuristic, but Silver Waves is far more entertaining because it turns on a gasoline engine sound. Go to Silver Waves and then accelerate, and it sounds like this. So if you miss the sound of a gasoline engine when you're driving around in your electric car, no problem. You can just turn on Silver Waves in the sound experience and get that gas engine sound back through your speakers while you're driving. And like I said, of course, you can also just turn off these sounds entirely if you want to drive around in silent electric car normalcy. But as strange as that is, how about the fact that most of the menus in this center screen have sort of an orange accent color theme to them? And if you look closely, are those ghosts? Like next to this little menu item, you can see little ghosts printed there, right? Well, it happens to be Halloween, the day I'm filming this video. And I'm sitting here looking at these ghosts in the orange trim and thinking, could it possibly have like a special graphic for Halloween? Are these ghosts here to like celebrate Halloween in my infotainment settings menu? And the answer is yes. This car's infotainment system comes with a feature called Graphical Goodies. And if you turn it on and then go into the info menu, it says that little pictures will appear on certain special days to commemorate them. And I guess Halloween is one of them. And those little ghosts appear on the menus, which is a crazy Easter egg. And you can see also one of the driver profiles has like a little spider and a spider web, also to commemorate Halloween, which is a really cool thing and very humorous and fun. A lot more creative and amusing than I would expect from a German company, especially stoic Mercedes-Benz, putting little ghost graphics as hidden Easter eggs in the infotainment system. But anyway, our next interesting quirk in the infotainment system can be found in the EQ menu. You go in there and it tells you exactly which systems you're using in the car are stealing range and how many miles they're stealing. You can see the climate control is taking exactly this many miles off your range and other accessories. And there's even a function in here where you can limit the usage of these accessories in order to get that range back and drive as efficiently as possible. You turn this on and then you can't operate the climate control quite as much in order to get more range and go further. That is a pretty cool feature, seeing exactly what effect the stuff you're doing is having on your driving range. And still more quirks in this infotainment system. The next one is ambient interior lighting. You get this car into the dark and you can really see the interior lighting is fantastic. These sort of swoops of color all throughout the dashboard, the door panels, the ceiling. It is beautiful. And unlike a lot of cars with sort of simple ambient lighting, this one really does have an effect on your emotion and your mood in this interior more than just about anything else because of the depth they've gone to place this ambient lighting everywhere in the interior. And the cool thing is it's all configurable. You go into the menu here and you can change the ambient lighting color or even colors because you can have multi-tone colors all over the ambient lights in the dashboard and in the front. It really is impressive and it really does help set a mood and a tone in this car more than any other vehicle because of just how much lighting there is in here. So it's cool that you can configure it all. And next up, yet another interesting infotainment quirk. This one is called automatic seat positioning. And the way it works is you get in the car, it detects your height and size, and then you press this button and it will automatically position the seat and the steering wheel to your most comfortable position. This is pretty amazing. Other Mercedes-Benz models have this feature too, but you have to actually enter your height and weight. In this car, it just automatically detects it and then will position the seat and the steering wheel where it thinks it's best for you. Which really does feel like the future. And next up, another interesting item worth noting for this screen is the trunk opener menu. You can see a little button at the bottom of the screen that says trunk. If you tap on that, it pulls up a larger screen, allowing you to open or close the trunk. The weird thing is how it works. If you want to open the trunk, you have to stick your finger here, slide it over to open, and then leave it there. If you pull your finger off at any point, it stops opening instantly and it only opens like halfway. You have to leave your finger on the entire time for the trunk to fully open. It's the same deal with closed. You slide your finger to the right and you have to keep it there the entire time in order to actually close it. If you let off at any point, the trunk stops and won't fully close. Kind of an interesting way to do it. Worth noting though, there's also a hard button. In the driver's door panel storage area, you have a separate trunk opener or closer button like most Mercedes-Benz models have. So those are the quirks of the center screen in this car. But I also want to say before I move on, this system is fantastic. This is the latest version of Mercedes MBUX system, and I've said great things about MBUX in the past, but this is the best one yet. Incredibly responsive to my touch, you can see, and just really, really intuitive, easy to use, easy to figure out. Climate controls, navigation, changing menus, settings, everything is really easy in this screen. I've said before, I think MBUX is the best infotainment tech on the market. Yes, even better than Tesla. And I'm certainly saying that now about this one. This is the best version of MBUX yet, and it's just really easy and simple to use. But next up, I want to move on to the quirks and features of the rest of the hyper screens, starting with the passenger display screen. Yes, the passenger gets their own screen in this car. When you're just driving along as the driver, the screen is dark, but the moment it detects some weight in the passenger seat, someone sitting here, this little icon comes on and allows you to turn on on the passenger screen. And once you do that, you can see a full range of options and menus and things you can select and do over here. In fact, if you're sitting here as the passenger in this car, you can really be a co-pilot to the driver doing all sorts of stuff, because you can enter a navigation destination, you can change the radio, you can make a call, you can change the interior ambient lighting color. Basically anything that the driver can do or the center screen can do, the passenger screen can also do it. And basically the passenger screen is just a slightly older version of MBUX with all of the car functionality still built in, so the passenger can do pretty much everything over here that the driver or the center screen can do, except now it's even easier to reach and see for the passenger. And yes, even the passenger screen has these little ghost Easter eggs built into some of the menu items, reminding you again that it's Halloween. A cool little touch. With that said, although I do like the passenger screen and I like the concept of the passenger screen, when you're in the car as a solo driver with no passenger and the screen off, the glare can be a little annoying. You can see here I'm driving and basically every tree is reflecting in this screen because of its angle and because of how shiny it is as a screen. I imagine this is something that you would get used to over time as you're driving, but having just driven this car for the first time for the last few days, it's a little disorienting seeing all that stuff like fly by on your dashboard. It's kind of a strange reflection over there. But anyway, finally I want to move on to the last display in the hyper screen, and that would be the gauge cluster screen. You can see here directly behind the steering wheel, these are your gauges. Although this isn't dramatically different in terms of functionality from other Mercedes-Benz models with this gauge screen, which I've already reviewed. Now I want to move on to the rest of the EQS quirks and features, so I will link those reviews below where I get into more depth into how the gauge screen works. And it's the same deal with the steering wheel. This is Mercedes' latest steering wheel and it has some cool functionality, but since I've already covered it in some other models and some other reviews, I'll link those reviews in the description below so you can check them out if you want more in-depth coverage of the gauge cluster screen and the steering wheel. However, in this vicinity, there is one item I really do want to talk about, and that's the heads-up display, which has some amazing new functionality for this car. Like most vehicles, the heads-up display projects some information onto the windshield directly in front of the driver. And even in its basic state, it's pretty useful. You have your speed limit there and your vehicle's current speed. It'll show you like navigation, directions, and information, which is of course very useful, and your current status of your driver assist tech. But how about this for a cool quirk? You see this little green line on the windshield? That's the driver assist system letting you know that it sees the car in front of you while you have the system switched on. You can see that green line actually follows the car around, even around a curve, just confirming for the driver that the car knows what it's following and knows where that car is. But it gets even cooler. Here's a car that's entering my lane with lane change, and you can see the green line now switches to let you know, hey, this EQS has detected this car that has entered our lane. Okay, now it's in our lane. And then it changes out of our lane and it sees all of that happening and confirms it for you, which is so cool. And then the green line switches back to the car that it had been following before. This is a really cool touch that really lets you see on a real-time basis exactly what this car is seeing in terms of vehicles around it, in front of it. And the heads-up display has an amazing feature that works in conjunction with the navigation system. If you have the nav system on and navigating you to a destination, the heads-up display will pop up arrows that show where you need to turn in actual, like, real time based on the road in front of you. So it'll point to the street where you actually have to turn on, rather than just telling you you have to turn in a quarter mile or whatever. It actually shows you with arrows where you have to turn to make it incredibly easy to navigate with this system, and that is also really cool. But anyway, next we move on from the hyper screen and onto the rest of the quirks and features in this interior. I want to start with these controls here in the center console. Now, I already showed you the little fingerprint square that you can use to pull up your driver profile, but there's more here. You can see the start-stop button. When you get in this car, you press this button in order to start it. Some electric cars don't have a start-stop button. You just get in and drive, but this one does. My very favorite item in these center console controls is the hazard lights, because when you push it, you have these cool little red lights that light up on either side to let you know the hazard lights are on. And a lot of cars, the button itself lights up, but here it's sort of flanked by these cool red flashes of hazard light. Now, also in this control panel, you have a little control here marked dynamic with some arrows. If you press that, you can change the drive mode that this car is in. And one cool thing, when you go into sport mode, it makes a fun little sound. And when you come out of sport mode, it sort of makes the opposite sound to let you know you're dialing back your excitement. Also worth noting, in the center console control area, this little icon turns on the camera system. The cameras in this car are amazing, fantastic quality, but also just really comprehensive. And my favorite is this 360 camera that you can see right now. I'm moving all the way around the car, and I can see basically every angle as if there's a camera like hovering around the car, showing every little side of the car. This is a pretty big vehicle, but when the camera quality is this good, it makes it feel smaller, especially when you're trying to park it in tight spaces or in a small compact city. Really, really useful camera tech in this car. By the way, one other cool feature of the camera system in this car, it can function as a security camera system when the car is locked. You can see this little decal on the door that says Guard 360 Protection, just letting people know, hey, you're on camera. So if someone bumps into the car, tries to break in, they will be seen by the recording security cameras when the car is locked, which is a pretty cool feature. But anyway, on to some more general items to discuss in this interior. I mentioned the ambient lighting, but I didn't talk about the climate control vents, which are also very beautiful. The center climate vents are mounted right here. You can see sort of at the top of the dashboard above the hyperscreen. But the cool thing is the way they flow into this dashboard line, which then flows all the way into the door panel and just becomes kind of a trim piece. It makes these center climate vents almost feel like they're hidden, even though they really aren't. It almost makes them feel like a beautiful piece of interior trim. And speaking of beautiful interior trim, this car certainly has it. This isn't even the top spec model of the EQS, and it's still a gorgeous interior, really high quality, really luxurious, like you'd expect from Mercedes-Benz. Certainly a leg up on Tesla, as it should be given the higher cost, but the interior really is the quality and luxury you would imagine from a Mercedes-Benz take on a full-size luxury electric sedan. But next up, moving back over to the door panels, which I had mentioned a second ago, this is where your seat controls are, and I have to say, this is one feature in the interior that really annoys me. These seat controls are just difficult to use. They don't actually move when you press them, so you get no feedback at all for whether you're pressing hard enough or whether the seat is just maxed out in that position. And sometimes it's difficult to figure out exactly where you're pressing at all. If you go just a little too far forward, something maybe moves that you didn't want to move, and these seat controls just really aren't all that easy to use. And by the way, speaking of the seats, worth mentioning, they do include these headrest pillows. You have your standard headrest, but also this soft, fluffy pillow you can stick your head back on. Very lovely while you drive around, and very luxurious. And finally, I want to talk interior storage up front. You do have a glove box in this car. You press this little silver button and the glove box opens right up, and it's about the size of a normal glove box. You also have here in the center console this panel, which you can open up by pressing the silver tab at the end of it. And when you do open it up, you can see there's a little storage area in here, and this is also where your wireless charger is located and where your cup holders are located, as you can see, so you can stick your drinks in here. Interesting operation with these cup holders though. You can slide the edge of the cup holder around so that it locks in place and is no longer a cup holder. Instead, it offers more center storage if you don't need to hold cups. But if you then want to use it as a cup holder again, you just press the bottom of the cup holder and it snaps right back into place and resumes its position as a cup holder. Kind of unusual and interesting design. Other storage in this interior, the center armrest, of course, can open up as a lid where it has a storage area underneath it. And there's also a cool little hidden storage compartment under the center console. You have this sort of floating space here where you can stick larger items. I think they think for bags or purses if you just want to keep them in place in the middle here. There's also even a strap in here, which could actually be kind of useful. If you want to put some larger item in here, but you don't want it rolling around, you can use that strap. And next up, we move on to the back seat of the EQS. And the first thing you notice when you get back here is it's huge, very roomy, a lot of space back here, even good headroom, which is kind of a surprise because of the design of this car. But there's good space for heads, legs, knees, hips. It's a big luxury car, and so you get a big back seat like you might expect. As for quirks and features back here, I draw your attention to this little climate control pad for the back seats. Pretty standard stuff. You can adjust the temperature, the airflow, that sort of thing, but you also have a display for your interior air quality. Just like up front, you have a display back here letting you know that the air is safe and pure. That was clearly a big focus for this car, having nice, clean air in the interior. And just like the front seat, seats. The back seats also have headrest pillows. Again, very fluffy and very nice to stick your head on. It just feels so relaxing and luxurious. Also worth noting with these back seats, there is a center armrest that you can put down and you can use it to rest your arm. The cool thing though is what comes out of the center armrest. You press it once and it pops a little bit out for a pen holder. You press it twice and then it pops all the way out for cup holders as well. So if you need to access a pen that you have stored back here, but not necessarily access your cup holders, you can do that with one press instead of two to get to your cup holders, which is kind of funny. Other rear seat quirks back here though, there really aren't any. There's a version of this car with a super high-end back seat that has tables and a center console and all that stuff, but this isn't it. This is just a fairly standard back seat, and frankly, it's how I suspect most people will actually order this car. And next we move outside the EQS, and there is a lot to discuss out here, starting with styling, which has not been particularly well received. Most people do not like how this car looks. They think it's weird and egg-shaped. I personally like it. I think it looks like a cool luxury sedan from the future, but this opinion is not shared by most people. And in fact, I haven't really met anybody else who has agreed with me that they like this design, but I think it's kind of cool. Regardless of your opinion on the design though, this car is incredibly aerodynamic. Mercedes-Benz says this has the lowest drag coefficient of any vehicle. It's an incredibly slippery shape, which allows them to maximize range, which is of course a huge deal with an electric car. But anyway, let's talk about getting into this car. You have your standard Mercedes-Benz key fob. When you press the unlock button, the door handles pop out, and they also reveal Mercedes-Benz printed on each door handle, just so you know. Obviously from here you can pull the door handle and get in, but if you lock the car, the door handles go right back into the door, so they're sort of flush with the outside of the car, which is becoming a big thing. Not only does this look cool, but it also helps to make the car more aerodynamic, since the door handles aren't always sticking out like they are on most cars. Now, speaking of branding, that Mercedes-Benz that pops out on the door handle, you also have an interesting piece of branding on the side of this car. On the A-pillar, you can see EQS is written right here. I've never seen this before on any other Mercedes-Benz model, but they had a little extra space here thanks to the design of this car, so they decided to stick that there, I guess, to help people identify this unusual new Mercedes. And next, since we're talking about some unusual exterior items with this car, let's discuss probably the weirdest thing about the entire outside of this car, and that would be this little panel here on the driver's front fender. This is not the door for the charge port. That is located in the back of the car. You can see it here, opens up like a regular Mercedes-Benz fuel door, sort of an electronic assist. You plug your charger in there, and that's how you charge the EQS. So you might be wondering, what exactly is this? Well, in order to explain that, I first have to talk about the front end of this car, which is fixed in place. You don't have an engine up here, obviously, but you also don't have a storage compartment, unlike most electric cars where there is storage up here. And that's because the air cleaner is located in the front of this car. The technology Mercedes-Benz uses to make sure the air is perfectly pure, which they show you on all those interior displays, that takes up the front end, and so there's no way to get into the front of this car. It's not a trunk, not an engine, nothing. Which brings us back to this panel. Pop open this panel and you can see the washer fluid icon. This is how you add washer fluid to your EQS, because you can't open the front panel and just pour it into a reservoir since it doesn't open. Instead, this little door on the outside of the car is for adding washer fluid. I have never seen a washer fluid door before on a car, but the EQS has one. And since I'm discussing EQS front quirks, let's move on to the very front, where undoubtedly the biggest quirk is the grille. You have the Mercedes-Benz three-pointed star in the center, and it's surrounded by all these other three-pointed stars. They're not in circles, but it's like a formation of three-pointed Mercedes stars all around the middle one. Of course, this car being electric doesn't need an actual grille, so this is what they did instead, a flotilla of three-pointed stars. Other than that, the front of this car is actually not all that weird, which is surprising. For such a weird car, they could do some weird stuff with the lighting, but they didn't. It all looks pretty normal, except that this front light bar turns on some of the time, but even that is not all that unusual today. A lot of cars have front light bars now. It's a surprisingly tame front end, aside from all the three-pointed stars. And interestingly, it's the same deal around back. The rear lighting is also not really all that unusual. You can see the turn signal on, nothing too weird there. Again, you do have a light bar going across the back, but that has become pretty standard fare in the car industry now. Mercedes-Benz could have done a lot more interesting and weird stuff with lighting. A lot of automakers are doing that, but they didn't for this car. You do, however, have a couple of notable items around back. One is the font they're using for EQS 450 Plus. This is a new, more futuristic font, different from gas-powered Mercedes-Benz models, and I guess it's intended to separate these electric EQ models and sort of bring them into a future with a new font. Also interesting back here, you don't have a trunk popper. There's no like little rubber piece you press to open up the tailgate. There's no easy way, there's no handle or lift back here to get this thing open. It's kind of a strange thing until you discover the Mercedes-Benz logo is your hidden trunk popper. You press the top of the Mercedes-Benz logo and then the tailgate opens up. Take another look at that. You press the top and the tailgate opens right up, which is a very cool little hidden quirk in order to get into the tailgate and the cargo area in this car. And next, since I've opened the tailgate, let's talk cargo area. It's huge. This is a luxury sedan, I guess, but really it's a giant luxury hatchback, and it has a massive cargo area back here. Would be much bigger than a regular sedan trunk, so there's a lot of practicality. In fact, this giant cargo area really does make up for the fact that you don't have storage up front where a lot of electric cars do. Instead, you just have a lot of storage in back. And in case you need even more storage, you can lift up this little panel on the floor of the cargo area, and there's even more storage back here where you can stick even more stuff. There's a lot of space in the back of the EQS. It's unusually practical for a full-size luxury sedan slash hatchback. But finally, I want to go over a few general details that are interesting about the EQS. Now, like I mentioned earlier, this is the EQS 450 Plus. Strangely, there's no EQS 450, so just the base model is the Plus. You can't get a minus. And it has about 330 horsepower, like I said, and an EPA-rated range of about 350 miles between charges, and it starts around $103,000. Now, the EQS 450 Plus comes with only rear-wheel drive, and Mercedes-Benz says it does 0 to 60 in about 5.5 seconds. Or if you want more power, more everything really, you can upgrade to the EQS 580. That's the top trim level, at least for now, and it starts around $120,000. It comes standard with about 520 horsepower, and all-wheel drive is standard on the 580, and it does 0 to 60 in the low 4-second range, which is pretty good, really fast for the 580. But of course, you're spending more money to get more power. The one benefit the 580 doesn't offer is more range. In fact, that is a little less range than the 450 Plus. This one, 350 miles of range, the 580, 340 miles. Still pretty good, but you don't get a range benefit when you pay more for the more powerful EQS 580. Now, as for sizing, this is a big vehicle. It is a full-size luxury sedan, and it's about 205 inches long, which makes it, I think, about 3 inches shorter than an S-Class, but that's the level you're in, full-size S-Class territory for the EQS. Weight, however, is a lot higher. This weighs almost 6,000 pounds. Very heavy vehicle because of all the batteries and all the luxury combined into one. Makes for a pretty heavy car, no surprise. All right, time to drive the EQS. Now, I have to admit, this car kind of snuck up on me a little bit. There hasn't been a huge uproar or excitement about this car. I think there's two big reasons for that. One, Mercedes-Benz is just so damn late to enter the world of the electric car that it's like, people are kind of already there, and this isn't as big of a deal. And also, a lot of people just don't like how this car looks. It just doesn't have a appearance that most people like. And so I didn't have high expectations, or frankly any expectations at all for this car. I just hadn't really paid that much attention to it, and I think a lot of people haven't. But I have to say, I am tremendously impressed with this EQS. Like, really, really impressed with it. Let me go through a few reasons why. The technology is one of the biggest. It is fantastic in here. And it's not just a situation where they've stuffed in a massive screen and it doesn't really do an enormous amount. Everything in here is so good and so easy to use. And I drive around looking at this screen and using this screen and just wishing I had this screen in every car I own. It just makes life easy and good, and it's so usable and just excellent, this hyper screen. But to me, probably the more desirable and more exciting thing about this car is just how luxurious it is and how nice it is. I only recently reviewed the new S-Class, and it's a fantastic vehicle and it's just wonderful. And now I'm sitting in this, and I have to say I would get this over an S-Class, which I know is a bit sacrilege because it's ugly and it's, you know, the S-Class is this storied name and this is some like new contender. This is better. This is a better car. There's a few reasons. One, it's just as nice and just as luxurious, but it has better technology, it's just as comfortable, and you have additional practicality because the hatchback and back, and it's an electric car. I mean, there's a real benefit to that. Like, this is the future, and so many people are going electric, and this is here. Now, I'm gonna have Tesla people watch this video and criticize it and say, hey, wait a minute, this thing is 0 to 60 in 5.5. It only does 350 miles of range and it costs over 100 grand. The value proposition isn't there. I disagree. 350 miles of range is still really good. This is just nice. This is way nicer than any Tesla. Any rational Tesla person, not someone who's heavily obsessed with the stock price and all that, but a rational Tesla owner, driver, they know it's not that nice inside. There's drawbacks to the interior of a Tesla. You buy it because of the performance and the tech. Well, this car, there's no drawbacks. The interior is very nice, it's very luxurious, and this is sort of a mid-trim kind of, the sticker price on this is about $117,000. These go a lot higher than that. If you get the EQS 580, you spend more money, you get a nicer car than even this one. But this is pretty nice. And I have to say, I think it's probably the nicest, most luxurious electric car that I've been in. And so Porsche offers this ability to have an electric car and still almost like a sports car driving experience. Now Mercedes-Benz gives you an electric car that's also an S-Class, except more practical, more futuristic, better technology. I don't really see any great benefit in getting an S-Class unless you're just don't want to adopt an electric car. So what really are the drawbacks here then? I mean, range potentially is one of them. 350 miles, yeah, Tesla does 400. Lucid, the Lucid Air supposedly is going to do 500 or something. And most importantly, 350 miles is enough for the vast majority of people the vast majority of the time. I think the real drawback is the styling of this car, and obviously just the general price. You know, $120,000 is a lot of money for any car. And trying to sell an electric car in this space is a little tough. It's generally older consumers who are a little less willing to adapt. And so that's the Mercedes-Benz EQS. This is a wonderfully luxurious car, certainly the most luxurious electric car I've ever been inside. And it has some amazing technology and a great driving experience too. Most people don't love the styling. I like it, but most people don't like it. But this is a great step into the electric car future for Mercedes-Benz. And now it's time to give the EQS a DOUGSCORE. Starting with the weekend categories and styling, I personally love how the EQS looks. Way more interesting and cool than a normal sedan, but I understand that most people don't like it, so I'm going to compromise and give it a relatively mediocre 6 out of 10. Acceleration 0 to 60 is in the high 5-second range for the EQS 450 Plus, so it gets a 4 out of 10. Handling is normal for a car like this, and it gets a 5 out of 10. Fun factor is low. This is about luxury rather than fun, and it gets a 4 out of 10. Cool factor is decent, though, as this is certainly an exciting new car that'll turn heads, and it gets a 6 out of 10 for a total weekend score of 25 out of 50. Next up are the daily categories and features. The EQS is tremendously well equipped with a ton of great stuff. It doesn't quite have everything though, and it gets a 9 out of 10. A slightly better equipped EQS 580 would probably get a very rare 10 here. Comfort is fantastic, and the EQS gets an impressive 9 out of 10. Quality is excellent, though the interior isn't quite on the level of the better equipped EQS 580 or the S580 I reviewed, and it gets an 8 out of 10. Practicality is good, a little better than a sedan thanks to the tailgate and large cargo area, and it gets a 6 out of 10. Finally, value, and while cars like this can hardly be considered a good value at nearly $120,000, I think this is a good value in the luxury sedan realm. Given the price tag and all the technology here, it gets a 7 out of 10 for a total daily score of 39 out of 50. Added up, and the DOUGSCORE is 64 out of 100, which places the EQS here against rivals. It loses out to the new Mercedes S580 I recently reviewed, but only because the S580 scored higher in the weekend categories due to more
more power. The EQS scored higher in the daily categories, which is a big deal. Overall, the EQS is a tremendously competent luxury sedan, and I'd recommend it over an S-Class. I truly would if you can stomach the styling.